First of all, thank y'all. Let's see.
Milling it.
Oh, Ron, good morning.
Huh?
I'm gonna mute you, sir.
Why is everyone muted? Like, why you're muted?
Thank you.
Yeah. Alright, cool. Okay, listen. So you're going to the Slack for open governance, and me and Ankita were discussing it. A lot of people brought up a lot of valid points, and it kind of like it doesn't make sense to run the experiments which we know already not going to work out. Like if you're taking the oligarchy approach into consideration, where only the leadership board makes decisions, we know what the outcome is going to be. No one's going to actually go ahead with that entire flow. Because I mean, looking at Slack, not a lot of people are keen on like the leadership board taking all the approaches. I'm just saying. So we know the outcome of the.
Yeah.
Wait, I can't hear you.
Just the way that you kind of, I don't want to say downplayed it, but there was general rebellion. The Slack made it pretty clear that that was a bad idea. So
Yeah. So everyone's kind of against the LB right now.
okay.
So I think yeah.
What they're against is the leadership, the oligarchical form of the leadership board, in which there's just exclusively top-down decisions. Now, the one thing though that I want to throw out there potentially is that you know, when we were chatting the other day, that there was this potential kind of shift that, and again, maybe we're gonna. This is a nonsensical argument, but that as we move from sexy to mundane tasks, that there'll probably be, or we suspect that there will be a greater need for an oligarchical style just to pick up that tempo. Again, probably more, not probably, definitely something for not the build phase, but the management phase. But I thought that was I'm significantly curious enough about that to still suggest we do the oligarchical approach, but I will bow to the wishes that I can see on the flip side that there really is no need to spend time and energy doing oligarchy. And so I guess my question is then, of all the options that are out there on DT, or since your internet isn't going very well, Ankita, if you can speak on her behalf, which model do you want to put in that spot? I was reading through some of the things, and it looks like there's a trend for J Silver, the custodian model. Is that significantly different than from like what Wikipedia does? Maybe.
Hello? Yeah. So listen, going to that Slack, everyone wants to go with that. You make a custodian group, and it's a mix of like participative democracy and your LB. So from what I've understood is the crowd upvotes the famous ideas and all the ideas that they want to see implemented, work on it. The LB picks it up and they take a final call on it. And J Silva had posted that ABCD approach, which I think was Shirish's thing and the flowchart. So can we implement that for like a week and see how it goes? And depending on the response, we either go ahead with that approach and pick up more issues they can work on, or we implement some other, the open allocation one or the oligarchy one.
Well, hopefully I was tracking, but I'm thinking we do the three in sequence to do a custodial style model, which is a little more of a mixed version. Maybe do a pure form of democracy where everything gets voted on, and then the open allocation where, in effect, there is no leadership board. Everything gets pushed down, and that either GRIs or whatever whatever coalesces guides the problem to fruition. So mixed model, a pure democratic voting structure, and then no structure. Does that get us a little bit closer then to a sweet spot?
Yeah, that sounds good enough, but I still think we need to hash it out more before we do it. Also, should our first approach be setting up the rules for the leadership board? Because before we can actually carry out any experiments, we need to define what the leadership board can do and can't do. So should that be our main concern right now? I mean, not main concern, our first concern.
Well, I think that's a great irony, because each model has its own set of rules. That's kind of one of the focal points we're looking at here. You know, what rules do we like? Which rules do we not like? Um, so for us to, so maybe we can set the parameters for activity in each model. But during the course of this experiment, you know, we'll be at the behest of the leadership board, utilizing the rules of that particular 2-week experiment or week experiment. So it's almost a chicken and the egg sort of thing.
No, not particularly. I mean, shouldn't we like see? I get what you're saying. It will change from week to week, but the leadership board, like, we still need to define what it is completely. We've just elected a bunch of people and we're like, hey, you guys are leaders. Now, don't we have to define what they can do and can't do? So once we have them defined, we'll see how they act in each experiment. Even if it's the open democratic one or the custodian group or whatever, we need to define their power before they actually come into the picture and, execute.
Okay. I think that's so. So it is. So instead of presuming the model or the rules of the model, bring a little more rigidity to it. So let's say that in the custodial model, just like there was a feedback. Sorry, someone posted on the wiki. There was a feedback loop like that. Maybe we'll set down. We will put into words what the rules are. So for an open gov, it's like, well, the rules will be there are no rules. Everything gets pushed down. For a custodial model, you know, an idea is identified, it gets presented, then, you know, there's that feedback mechanism. And then in democracy, there's an idea comes from, you know, from somewhere, anywhere in the crowd. It gets posted up to Meteor. When it reaches a certain amount of either critical mass or amount of votes, then it gets acted upon. Until that point, it stays there and nothing gets done. Those kind of rules. And is that something then that we as the managers of the experiment should do? Or should we go to the leadership board and say, hey, leadership board, in order for us to execute on this experiment, we need you guys to, here are the 3 organizational models, here are the loose definitions, talk about the rules in this sort of format? Or should we prescribe to them being the leadership board, what we think are the measurable rules so we can bring some standardization to the project?
Okay, fair enough point. Huh.
I mean, I think that's the latter. Nikita, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. Yeah, so what my suggestion was even the rules of what the leadership board can and cannot do, that can also be upvoted the same way, like the ideas or suggestions would do.
Okay, so actually that's part of the experiment.
Yeah.
Ooh.
So that way the people get to decide what the leaders do, and then the leaders can execute it.
Very Alice in Wonderland-like, but that makes sense. So would that be, you know, so part of one of the first efforts, or one of the first, you know, areas of integration would be then, okay, so let's say we start on Wednesday, and here's how it goes. First step is there's the mechanism for defining the rules over a 24, 48-hour period. Excellent. Then those rules then get defined, shared with the group, and then we start executing on that. The execution is now on the mundane or the sexy idea, and then that starts getting addressed utilizing the mechanisms just agreed upon, utilizing the rules of that organizational model. Is that kind of the road you're going down?
That sounds good. Yeah.
Okay. That's great. Makes a lot of sense.
Another concern I had was I think we should first define what problem we're trying to solve, as in what problems the platform is going to face, and then figure out a model around it instead of directly diving into what works, what doesn't work.
Well, I think when we look at all the questions, I think we're in the zone, we're in the right area. I'm not sure. So we're talking about nice ideas, and we should define the problem a little bit more. The nice idea of having the organizational model define their own rules.
I think there's too many questions we're trying to answer all at once.
Maybe. So, when it gets distilled down to kind of a basic element, what I see is we're still looking to understand the dynamics of trust and power. And so the question we could be asking, or maybe should be asking, is that which organizational model does that best? It creates trust or fosters trust between all the parties, and how is that trust fostered? Is it shared power? Is it a distributed power? Is it a respect for power? So it's almost we got two approaches, and so that kind of spins off into, okay, while we need to be respectful of trust and power, we have an organizational model. The organizational model, it's designed to make decisions. So at one end, there you go, Jay Silver's efficiency. So that's where you have the decision-making process. But then, where's the fine balance between making those decisions and then engaging the crowd? Because participation, being engaged, those are some of the things that are missing from Mentor and from the other models. So that's where I'm thinking, as long as we're in that ballpark, and we should craft then maybe a very open question around that, essentially, which is the best way, which is the best organizational model that makes decisions and engages the crowd. Not very sexy, but what we can do with that is a lot, because I think now that we're tightening up our band, we don't have this huge oligarchy over here and then open gov. We have now this tighter band. Do you think then that the results from that, from each experiment now, is that more telling, or would that be more cloudy? So I want to.
Sorry, I didn't get that. Could you repeat that?
The whole thing. So first of all, let me break it down. So as far as what our question should be, I'm thinking it should be, what is the best organizational model that supports our foundational issues of trust, power, and we'll modify that a little bit as per Jay Silver and efficiency, which takes in, it can solve the organizational model that can solve problems and still engage the crowd. So what's the preferable model? There may not be a best one, but which one has, as we look at all three, what are the trade-offs? Invariably, there is one. So how, as a question, is that in the same ballpark? Is that what you guys were envisioning?
Oh yeah, something of that sort. What we were thinking is it worth investing time in trying out the three different models when we already know, one of them has a higher preference than the others. So we were just wondering, does it make sense to run the experiment all over again?
I'm not following. Which model's going to win?
From the looks of it and the discussions, it seems like the democracy would win, where the leadership, the people would upvote ideas and leadership board would make a call on it.
Yeah.
That seems to be the most popular idea.
I think it's as much. It's looking at some of the consequences and some of the ramifications of engagement. So, to be frank, I'm not as interested, or I'm not as curious, I think, as in the outcome as I am by some of the features, i.e., the balance between speed and engagement. Why folks are going to try a certain model over another. Where is there a level of not just satisfaction, but actually dissatisfaction? Because the models in question now are not that far removed from each other. And if you're going to start looking at efficiency, there may be some approaches like I wouldn't imagine that a lot of us have used an open allocation model before. There is no leadership. So I'd be curious to see about responsibility, about how folks self-govern. Does the platform screech to a halt? And I think then a lot of those self-regulatory, some of the questions that come out of there, some of the behaviors and traits, be interesting for us to start logging and categorizing a little bit. So it's as much to get into the sum total as it is looking at it's as much to look at the parts as it is the sum total of said parts.
Okay.
Again, I could be wrong, and I'm not looking to dominate, but I'm curious by some of the interactions. And as I think about it, I may even be more curious if we're going to use such a narrow band of models and see if there are some sharp defining features. Because if I recall correctly, there was a huge push for weighted democracy when we did our last experiment in the Slack. There was a big push for it. Weighted democracy kind of crashed and burned. So I think that's kind of a cautionary tale that I think once we start getting into it and start turning anecdotes into reality, again, there might be a little shift. So.
Can we for the first week, like Ankita suggested, like starting from tomorrow till the coming Saturday, let's first let the crowd decide the rules of the leadership board. So that should give us enough time to design how the experiments should be. Because see, speaking from, like my opinion or 2 cents on this, oligarchy will be helpful in when you want to execute ideas faster. Speed and efficiency will matter there. But again, if you take up oligarchy, looking by the looks of it, no one wants that approach because it's going back to like the crowd has no say on it whatsoever. Even though you end up voting the leadership board, and it's gonna ruffle a couple of feathers. So if we can have oligarchy mixed with say another approach, or like I actually like Jay Silva's hybrid model, to be honest. To me right now that looks like that looks like a good approach. But I get what you're saying when it comes to speed. What about the unsexy ideas? You won't have the crowd upvoting unsexy ideas. So how do you get those ideas to actually get executed? So that way over there your oligarchy makes sense because the leadership board will look at the idea and be like, hey, that's an unsexy idea, but it's an important idea and we should probably implement it. So I get where you're coming from there, but if you can do a combination, it will probably help for the unsexy ideas. Yeah.
And this is what I don't know. I mean, this is, that's why we're going to run an experiment. It could be, there's a little bit of self-awareness. I think we were calling sexy and unsexy, but I think when Al and I were chatting, there's about, kind of the foundational things. You got to pay the bills. You got to do this, the maintenance stuff. You got to, pick up the garbage. You got to do the things that just need to be done to have an organization roll. And not everyone likes to take out the garbage. So that was really maybe this isn't. Okay, hold on a second. Jay Silver he's suggesting the hybrid. Hold on a second, Jay. So there's conversation that's going on in the OGov Slack channel. So Jay Silver, can you? I hate using hypotheticals. So let's do this. Jay Silver, let's see, where is he? I think it's in. Okay. Can everyone or anyone have folks looked at what Jay Silver posted on the wiki? Because I think Aditi, you mentioned the ABC. That's Suresh's version. If I'm reading this correctly, is the flow charts the graphic representation of what we're calling the hybrid model?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you that.
Okay. So how about then you have in place of using an oligarchical model, let's use a hybrid. We need a need a name. Needs a name. We'll call it hybrid for now. But if we can think of something, the second one, have it be more of, I don't know, kind of like the wiki model, or now let's just call it pure democracy, in which everything gets voted on. Pardon me. And then the third one, open gov or open allocation, where all problems are solved by the crowd. Is that just spitballing? Is that then a good dispersion of org models?
Let's. Okay, Shasti, speak.
No, I was just going to say that, yeah, that's a good idea. That's it. Go ahead.
Let's not freeze it for now. Let's start off with it. See what response we get for the hybrid model. And I'm not saying, I'm open to the idea of running the other two ones as well. But let's start off with the hybrid model. We can always change our entire flow as and when it goes. Let's not fix anything. Let's not make anything concrete right now. Let's start off with one model and see what the response is, and depending on that, we can run the other approaches or not.
So then let me jump in. Sorry, I've kind of been dumbing the call on this one, so my apologies. You mentioned before that I think you said, why bother doing the other models because we know the outcomes. So what I'd like to do is put a little thought on how I can convince you all that that running the experiment with 3 different approaches gives us some parenthetical rules. It gives us some variation. Again, it gives us a balance between power, trust, and efficiency, and where we can see where there's some strength and weaknesses. Like, maybe the hybrid model is good because it solves the sexy and then the unsexy, whereas a democracy, it's great. I think it has some value because that was the election model we chose. It was a very pure participatory democracy. So why not have democracy all the way through? And I'd be curious to see what we like the voting mechanism to bring in the leadership board, but the leadership board itself shouldn't be run on those same principles. I think that's kind of a curious dichotomy. And then open allocation, I think Michael Bernstein had mentioned at some point in passing, I'm not going to put words into his mouth, but there's, somewhere along the line to create a leadership board that's functionally obsolescent, that is, if we're going to be crowd-owned at some point, the most purest manifestation of that is just to have no leadership board at all. So kind of spitballing here, that would be some of the justification for having the 3 approaches, to give us some more data sets to then, if it is indeed the hybrid model, well, then it should be a very clear decision. But there may be some other folks that once you start getting involved in these different models, not sure their mind's going to change, but there may be some hidden benefits that we haven't been able to uncover. That being said, if you all think that we should just spend 6 weeks doing hybrid, I will acquiesce. I wanted to clarify as to what some of my rationale would be for having 3 models run through the ringer.
Another thing we need to consider is the data that, I mean, we're probably going to need data to back up who chose which model, and we shouldn't end up scrambling like last time in the last minute to collect that data. So we should probably think this through properly this time.
So we're talking about data. We're looking at the data collection piece, the questions we should ask, or how we're going to collect the data.
No, we need to figure out how we not how exactly, but we need to prove it. We need to have substantial data to prove it to them that that model works better than the other two. So I don't know how that would work. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious about what substantial data is. Is it a depth of participation, or is it the width of questions that we're going to ask?
Overall, yeah, to probably prove the overall satisfaction of the whole community.
Well, it's an experiment, so you can't mandate participation. I mean, it's one of the great ironies is that that have nobody wants to participate in the experiment, which is telling unto itself. So I know Aditi had made a mention last call about the ebb and flow and being able to look at a percentage of total population participation rate and see if there's a number or is there some value we can derive from that. So I'm totally on point. I would love to wave a magic wand and have all 78 active slackers participate, but truth be told, if we only get 14 or 15 folks, that number itself is telling. But then, to your point, with 14 or 15, only a third of our population, can we consider the results representative or accurate, or or are we going to constantly devolve to having the words like we suspect or we suppose, not as detailed?
I'm looking at Jay Silva's comments on Slack.
Yeah, as am I.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Okay, so what do we want to do for now? Like, how do you want to start this off? Because
let's I think, to the participation question, if folks don't think that it's a valuable experiment, then regardless of the methodology put together, people aren't participating. They're, we shoot ourselves in the foot. I'm not looking so much at the outcome. That the group is going to decide this or the other. I'm curious, or I'm intrigued by the reasons for choosing or not choosing a model. Is there greater trust in one system versus another? Is there better power distribution? Is there greater satisfaction or dissatisfaction in one over the other? So I'm not suggesting we're moving forward with an agenda. I'm looking at the core competencies of this experiment. The whole research group's experiment, and that is to build a platform predicated on trust and power. So to look at the three approaches through that lens, as I mentioned, I think there's some value there. If we just use a hybrid model or just one, there's no comparables. It's like, okay, that's great. We have great numbers here, but what do we compare them to? So I guess that my question is that if we're going to go down the route of just using, let's just say we use the hybrid model, we measure it for 6 weeks, okay? Then where should the focus be then on some of our questions? The ability then of a hybrid model to manage sexy and the unsexy, and we begin to see, so over a 6-week period we'll have greater repetitions, we'll have constant engagement. The fatigue factor, which we were concerned about moving from group to group, will now be a feature of the org model. So you begin to see, like, yeah, this is great, but you can't sustain it over a 6-week period because people get burned out, etc. Again, I'm just kind of spitballing here. But if we use just a hybrid model, how can we construct the question in the experiment to get some depth and understanding of the mechanisms, i.e. the relationship between the leadership board and the workers, the levels of engagement, the levels of power and trust?
No, you make sense. You make sense.
I think that's something we need to reposition then the experiment. That it is then about trust, it's about power. How do we craft the conversation? How do we get into satisfaction surveys? How do we get to understand the nuances of the relationship between the two?
I really I get where you're coming from, but okay, for now, should we like at least roll out one? Let's start with the hybrid because it seems to be getting a lot of attention and seems reasonable right now. Let's start with the hybrid. See what the crowd response is through surveys, ideas, etc. Whatever. Capture the response and everything, and then based on that, we either extend hybrid for another week and see if the crowd participation level dips or not. Let's do it week by week. Because honestly, if you ask me, right, like I know I've seen the crowd participation and the papers coming up last 2 weeks and last 3 weeks, everyone's going to jump into it. Your participation level is going to rocket like crazy. The results that you get back, it's going to be much higher. And when you actually do a comparison of it, you're going to, whichever experiment is being run that week, that's going to seem like the best idea. So should we start off with hybrid and see what happens?
I have no objection about that. If that's, let's think about this a little bit more. As we did the last time around, we kind of, we worked off a structure and we, modified it and tweaked it. So yeah. let's use the same approach. So let's say right now, let's construct a little conversation around this. That one, we're going to look at the hybrid model.
Okay.
And then potentially only. So, Nikita, to your question many moons ago, it's like, okay, what's the question that we're going to ask? I've shared my 2 cents on that with regards to power and trust. With all the folks that are participating and watching, let's then engage. Before we build the experiment, let's engage then any questions or concerns they have about those relationships. Are there any questions or curiosity about it? Pull that then into a very concise hypothesis. So basically, we're going to test the hybrid model and measure the trust power efficiency ratio coefficient, or we're going to see how efficient it is. What exactly is the power dynamic of a hybrid model? How trustworthy is it? Maybe we should try to craft it in such a way that we do get a positive or a negative number. It's like, it's great, it's a piece of paper, but a hybrid model in a crowd it's got some strengths and it's going to have some weaknesses. So how do we measure and capture that? So those are just the thoughts that I want that if to start digging into now, so we bring a certain amount of precision, because as we noticed from the last series of surveys that we did, that once we kind of are underway, it's hard for us to course correct. So if we're bringing, a little bit more of an agenda to this, let's get a little bit closer to being a fine point. And then, if we're gonna roll out the hybrid model, and then, I don't want to say course correct, but then say, okay, what are we gonna do? We're gonna say, oh, guys, we're gonna start with the hybrid model for a couple weeks. You like it, we'll keep going with it. If you don't like it, we're gonna move on. Or I'm of the opinion that if we're going to use the hybrid model and there is good sentiment to test it, then let's commit to that. Let's run an experiment for 6 weeks. Let's see what happens. None of this, let's test course correct kind of thing. Let's go all in. But again, structure the experiment in such a way that there's the positives and the negatives. And so at least at the end of 6 weeks, we got a lot of that we can comment on. And so we could say, hey, Chai, a hybrid model is the best way to manage and run a crowd for X and Y, Z reasons. It's optimal, efficient.
Then
I'm a little research assistant here.
Oh my gosh, so cute. Okay, let's do one thing then, Trigve. Let's whatever experiment we're running, let's do it from next week. This week that we have, first let the crowd upvote and decide what the rules of the leadership board are. Because whatever experiment we're running, we need to define what the scope of the board is. So let's research this week and figure out exactly which approach you want to go to. Because right now the discussion on Slack is still ongoing about the hybrid model and.
Yeah. Agreed.
Problems we're solving.
Yeah.
So let's use this week to do a bit more research and let's come up with a concrete proposal and then start implementing it from the next week. Would that be fine? Make more sense?
So hybrid model so instead of we'll take let's commit. We'll do the hybrid model. It's going to be for 5 or 6 weeks. I think over 5 weeks we spend the next week getting organized, getting focused, etc., etc. That gives us 5 weeks to roll out the project. I think that's ample time to do what we need to do. So let's commit to that. Hey, Jay Silver, can you translate and come up with maybe just a rough outline of converting the feedback chart into a set of rules, and let's see if we can then start advancing that a little bit. And then Aditi and Ankita, can we start, not we, but have the crowd, but if you guys can move the needle a little bit more, if you can move the needle on the questions, and now both the hypothesis as well as then the questions that we would use to collect the data to support or deny that hypothesis. I think in the question bank that we have, there's a lot of, I hope we're going in the right direction. If we can refine that, because there's some survey style questions, there's a couple different approaches.
Okay.
So if we can do that with the expectation that we'll, over the course of the week, next week, we will refine and define the rules of the hybrid model. So we'll be ready. That'll be one of the first tasks, or not necessarily have all the precise rules, but have them structured in such a way then that once we run the experiment, the first thing that the hybrid model can do is engage the crowd on, hey, these are the rules. Again, utilizing the tools, the mechanism of the hybrid model, engage the crowd on, okay, here's who we are, here are the rules, this is how it's going to work, we're going to use these to justify it, boom, boom, boom. And then we start going. So then in that sequence, we should probably define, not probably, we should define then the issues ahead of time that we should be, that the model should be kind of stress testing. You know, I know pricing was one idea out there. We should have maybe the emission statement, but some also more of the mundane, the more day-to-day things. I think that's going to be a tougher challenge for us to identify those ideas, to see how the hybrid model handles it, or how the crowd handles them utilizing the hybrid model. And then either it gets broken down in a, like, we then approach this in a rational model, like, okay, every week we're tackling an idea, a sexy and non-sexy one. And we're going to see then how the velocity can be sustained, that over a 5-week period, maybe we're handling 5 or 10 questions, with the idea that we are looking at the fatigue factor, we are looking at efficiency, and that this is maybe one way to capture that. Again, spitballing, there may be some other ways, but if we're just going to have one model, I think we now have the luxury of doing some other things.
We can keep tweaking it week by week, see the outcomes of 1 week, see the drawbacks, try and give solutions to it the next week. So ultimately, we should have like like the best, not the best, but a good model. And do you want to define the rules of the oligarchy and the 3 experiments that you proposed? I think people were put off a bit, maybe because they didn't understand what exactly was happening. Because when you look at oligarchy, when I read it initially, I was like, oh, the leadership board does everything, blah blah blah. So do you want to decide the rules for oligarchy and open allocation, and then maybe we can put it up on Slack and let the crowd decide on it if they want to, if they see what their views are on it.
Or my answer is no. No, I'm totally down with. I'm in. Let's do the hybrid model.
Okay, cool.
What I propose to Jay Silver is then let's look at the scope of the hybrid model. Okay, that by its very definition, if it has some characteristics of some top-down, mandate, oligarchical style features, maybe there are some rules, and I don't know if this is a leading question too much, but the hybrid model now says, okay, these ideas, they're the sexy ones, and we're going to handle them accordingly. These themes, these ideas, they're the non-sexy ones. We're going to handle them, with the other, but more oligarchical, more democratic. I don't know. I think these are some of the things that we have this week. If we're going to commit to the hybrid, let's flesh it out a little bit more. Ask some questions. Look at some of the procedural dynamics, and see what we can do with it.
Who decides if an unsexy idea is important or not? Like, not an unsexy, like a minor idea. Who decides if it's important or not?
Look, you hate putting air in the tires of your car, but if you don't do it, your car's going to go.
Okay, in that sense. Cool. Okay, fair enough.
So I think, what would be interesting is, some people love putting air in their tires. I don't, but I do it anyway. So I think so maybe your point is, if we move away from sexy or unsexy and look more at, if you look at some organizational models, it's easy to see where you have like maintenance jobs or maintenance functionality, like in the software world, maintaining maintaining your databases or your libraries, versus actually creating software. So maybe we could look at the agile, or look to, since we are a technology platform, to look to that domain and see how the division of labor is broken down, parallel that a little bit. We could then utilize some of that language. Because sexy, unsexy, it's very pejorative.
Yeah.
And even if you like doing the unsexy stuff, you're not going to tell anyone.
Cool. Okay.
So maybe it's production and maintenance, or a different language, because the unsexy stuff is, like I said, it's still critical. So So let's see if there's anything more on Slack. I think there was.
Okay.
Okay.
So let's wrap it up for now. Should we have should we have another hangout after Michael's hangout in the night? See if anything new that he's announcing, and then let's have a final hangout on the night and wrap it up. What we're going to do for this week, and we can start implementing. Put it up on Trello and get started from Sunday or something.
Yeah. You guys want to do it tonight, or you guys want to do it tomorrow morning? What works for the crew? I'd like to give us a little bit of time to let a lot of this stuff hang over.
Okay, fine.
I think if we do it Sunday night, it gives us the opportunity for this to marinate a little bit. So we've course corrected now to one model, but in doing so, let's think of the challenges and then what is required of us if we're going to do just model. Again, I think now asking the right question is much more critical, and then shaping some of the structured ideas around it and the rules. We've got a lot to do. I know Jay Silver's chimed in on looking at some of the rules. I think as part of it, if everyone can just start thinking of now some of the transactional, some of the functional things the leadership board's going to do, so we can start breaking down sexy and unsexy. And then, again, as we're all doing this, if we can do it through the lens of trust, power, efficiency, but also engagement. How the crowd is active and engaged in participating in the process.
Okay.
And I think if we're doing everything in that context, then I think we'll all align. We don't need to all be in lockstep. We need to be kind of in the same page. And I think that could set us up to doing
Good. Can you guys hear me? Is anyone there?
Yeah, I'm here. I can hear you. Hello.
Hi, is anyone there?
Hello.
Oh, okay. Hey, Karan. Yeah, what are your thoughts so far?
So I'm just catching up because I've just come from a break. So I'm reading the papers and I'm attending these hangouts. Um, but so far, I think it sounds nice, but I still haven't gotten anything concrete in my head. I mean, it's still all ideas all around, nothing concrete to do. So that's why I think I'm gonna wait for a little bit before I start presenting my views.
Okay, cool. Sounds good. So I think we'll have another hangout tomorrow since Jason was said hangout hangover. Makes sense. So we'll have it tomorrow
Yeah,
night and just go through all the ideas and read the Dynamo paper and the wiki or the wiki
Mm-hmm.
administrator paper. And I think there's a wiki on it. So
Okay.
we'll have a hangout tomorrow night and probably decide how it goes.
Yeah,
Oh,
sure.
Tigbe joined back. Cool. Tigbe, can you hear us? Oh, wait. Slack. Okay, I don't think Rigvay's mic's working. So,
Yeah,
do you guys have any questions? Please post it on Slack. Otherwise, let's wrap this up and meet up tomorrow. Jay Silva, post your comments in Slack. Juichi, anything you want to add?
I don't think she's online.
Okay, she's on Slack. Okay, cool. I'm gonna wrap this up then.
Okay.
Karan, thanks
Yeah.
for. Oh, okay, her mic doesn't work. Okay, cool. So let's continue this discussion on Slack, and we can wrap it up here. Is that fine?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure.
Okay, cool. See you guys then. Bye.